The Tennessee Vols are heading into their most critical recruiting stretch. How many players are they going to add around Faison Brandon?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, a longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. And we're going to be talking Vols today with my guy over there at Locked On Vols. We're going to be talking a lot about who they're trying to get with Faison Brandon, bring in a big class. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's get Kaner in here. Mr. Eric Kane. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Always good to talk a little Tennessee football. I know you're transitioning out of baseball because you guys actually care about the sport at Tennessee, unlike a lot of schools, but it helps to be good. With recruiting right now, Tennessee, as you and I talked about off air, they backload their OVs. The last 2 weekends, the vast majority of the kids they bring in, like this past weekend, Tristen was on campus, arguably, at least in my opinion, the best receiver in this class overall. And he's taking photos with Faison Brandon and stuff. And there's a lot of other kids too. What do you think is the biggest need for Tennessee in this class? They're around 10 commitments, give or take, from this point forward. And what's the buzz that you've heard, if any, on the Vols?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a good month so far. Again, as you mentioned, that Tennessee backloads the official visit calendar every single month or every single June every year. And this isn't anything new. I mean, Tennessee had 16 guys on campus this past weekend. I think going to have around 20 next weekend. Had 8 2 weekends ago, and not many at all to begin the month. So that's just kind of their strategy, kind of what they go about things. Tennessee, you look at the class, they've got 10 commits so far. Pretty well rounded in terms of position by position. Got a couple receivers, obviously looking to add a running back. And Tennessee's been so successful in running the football under Josh Heupel. Savion Hyder, who should be in next weekend, we believe, is kind of the cream of the crop there at running back, the top target. And Tristen, as you mentioned, number one wide receiver in the country. He was on campus this past weekend. I mean, Tennessee, you went from a couple of years ago where you're just trying to get into these conversations, right? And now you're not just swinging hard. I mean, you're a contender. I mean, I think Tennessee has a great chance. I mean, I'm not calling it, but I think Tennessee has a real chance in landing Keys. I know he's an LSU commit right now, but came over here. Kelsey Pope has been phenomenal in this recruiting from the get-go. Felt like he was leaning Tennessee early on, committed to LSU. He's still come back to Tennessee a lot. The relationships, I think, is a big factor for him. A lot of videos blowing up on Twitter, him doing his photo shoot and all that, having a good time. Faison Brandon was here this past weekend. I think that was I think that was by design, right, to get the quarterback in here to try to recruit his wide receiver and some other guys. So I think Tennessee feels good about Tristen right now. Of course, regardless of if he stays committed to LSU, if he flips to Tennessee or whoever, I mean, you got to have to sweat that thing out till, ink hits the paper, right, or the fax machine cools off, because that one's going to go down until the very end. But I think Tennessee's got some momentum with a lot of highly talented targets. But I think getting a good running back in this class is important. Stocking up on the defensive line, which Tennessee's already started in that regard, and obviously trying to get some playmakers to put around Faison Brandon, who I know you're high on him. I think you had him second or third in your quarterback list, but obviously a very talented player.
Yeah, they're doing everything they can to get him an opportunity to be that guy. Like, he's got Heisman Trophy ability. He's the kind of player in this offense because he can run, he can throw, and he's a very coachable kid. Like, being around Faison a few times, you're not going to meet a better young man. So I think Tennessee fans will like him on and off the field. He's a really good dude. But just read something where Legend Bay, the receiver out of Texas, they got a great shot at him.
Yeah.
And several more players besides, obviously, Tristen Keys. I don't know who they're going to get, but I'd have to imagine having Faison as your quarterback commitment, that makes it pretty easy to sell. Probably pretty easy to sell to Savion Hyder as well. That's another kid I've seen live, and holy cows, he shot out of a cannon. So
yeah,
they should be fine at the skill spots. in my
It's kind of
opinion.
interesting. You go back a couple of cycles in 2023, and Tennessee landed Nico in the month of March, and the assumption was, okay, well, all these guys are going to flock to play with Nico. And in Tennessee's class, I don't have it in front of me, it ended up being a pretty good class, but the star power was on the defensive side of the football in that class. With, if memory serves me right, Joshua Josephs, and I know that was a class before, but nonetheless, I remember the star power on that side of the football. So it never really materialized the way you thought it would. Maybe this go around with Faison Brandon, it can be different. You mentioned Legend Bay. I think Tennessee had a great weekend with him. You talk about an athlete, plays a little quarterback right now, but slot receiver, 5'8", 5'9", 175. Tennessee says they can give him the football in the backfield, out of wide receiver. They like the athlete, right? And if you put athletes around a star quarterback, good things can happen the more you develop, and of course, getting a strength and conditioning program. So I'm interested to see kind of when Tennessee goes on this commitment run. Again, already 10 commits in the class and got to start earlier this week for the 2027 class, who we'll hit on here in a moment. But when this run starts, I'm intrigued to see kind of where the star power is, because Tennessee, again, is very much in it on the offense side of the football. I think Gabriel Asenda, who you and I have spoke on several times, his stock just continues to rise on the offensive line. I mean, just a mammoth individual who can absolutely move at about 340 pounds. His stock continues to get better. So, does that attract more offensive linemen in this conversation? Tennessee's done a good job on the offensive line the past couple of years in terms of getting a star, guy to commit to the Volunteers. David Sanders, most notably, who's going to be the starting right tackle this year. So, going to be interested to kind of see how this goes a little bit. But last weekend was huge. This weekend's going to be huge. And then, the month of July, they kind of go back. They get off the mountaintop highs, talk about it with their families, with the decision-making group around them, and kind of, start deciding on commitment times and when they're going to announce.
Yeah, the commitment part is the interesting thing. And like we discussed, Tennessee feels they have a better chance of those commitments by backloading the visits. Everybody's got their own plan. Clemson brought almost everybody in on the May 30th weekend.
Yeah.
So there's certainly different philosophies, whatever it may be. But like, I'm looking at the list right now on my iPad, and it's like, holy cow. So that they've got kids from across the country coming. Georgia, obviously a focal point, Alabama, those states, but kids from Louisiana, obviously in-state. They're not messing around, man. It's really impressive. So I think the Vols, don't worry if you're looking at like, oh, how come we don't have a top 10 class right now? Well, you're borderline, and in about 2 weeks you might be. The next 2 weeks are everything in recruiting. So I think that the Vols should be a program that consistently makes it into the top 10, and having Brandon there. I know they didn't hit quite as much as what you were talking about in 23 with Nico. I'd be surprised if it's not a little better at the wide receiver. Again, they got Savion Hyder coming in next weekend. He's the creme de la creme for just about every program in the country. He's top 3 on everybody's board. They can get him, Legend Bay, and a couple others. Florida State and all these other schools are going after him, probably going to be magazine to play against them. I know that it's just part of it, though. You got to wait for it. So when we come back, I want to talk about the 27 commitment that some Tennessee fans might have heard about. It just happened. We're also going to talk a little bit more about this class and what's next. That is coming up next here on the Portal Podcast. There's nothing like the NBA Finals, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, and the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you've got to experience live, and this year's matchup between the Pacers and the Thunder is already really good, and it's 2-2. If you want to get in, check out one of the games. Game Time makes it easy, makes it fast to get it done. Seats for you, and it's very easy right there from your phone. Killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. If you want to do it with Game Time, because literally you can do it from your phone. I am not the most patient guy, but 2 or 3 clicks, you can find a seat, click on it, and see what the view is like and see the price right there. Very simple format. The Game Time app allows you to get it done very quickly. And if you don't want to go to an NBA game, there's baseball, there's all kinds of things you can go to, movie theater, comedy show, anything else. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Eric, let's talk a little bit about the latest commitment. this is always fun when you get somebody that is about as Vols family as you can be. I mean, your grandfather is a former coach that won a national title. Andy was the AD at Tennessee. Of course, we're talking about Fulmer. JP Pence, is that the proper pronunciation? He's
Peace. JP Peace.
Peace. He lives in Knoxville. I'll let you take it away. I'm sure you've seen him or know something about him. I'm not from that area. Take it away, brother. What's going on with him?
Yeah, really good-looking prospect. You kind of gave the bio information there. He's the grandson of legendary Tennessee football coach Philip Fulmer, and his dad played at Tennessee, and Robert Pease. So Tennessee is very much who he is. Tennessee is very much what he's been growing up around and all that. So it kind of makes all the sense in the world. But then again, he's really developed as a prospect. The last couple of years. We do a high school broadcast on Thursday nights here in the fall, and he plays at Knox West High School, and he was only a sophomore this past year, but we had them on television several times and kind of seen the growth and the development of him from the first of the season to kind of towards the end of the season, playing better in space, getting after the quarterback, just his athletic ability to make tackles in open space. It's been really impressive. Plus, he's starting to get big as well, starting to grow into his frame, 6'3", about 215-ish right now, and again, only a rising junior, so I think his best football is very much in front of him, but I don't think this is just let's just throw an offer and, committable offer to the guy that used to coach here, Philip Fulmer, Vol legend, used to be the AD here. No, JPP is the guy that's going to be a pretty good football player, down the line. So really happy for him and intrigued to see kind of how all this goes, and they start kind of building that 27 class because, as obviously it's never too early to start looking ahead in the world of recruiting.
Well, it's also good to get the local kid. I know that they got the King kid, the receiver, local. He's a Catholic, I believe. That kid's electric.
Yeah,
you might be the best overall slot receiver in the country.
Two guys that you might be going here, but they were on campus this past week. Brody Smith, father's Lee Smith. He's at Maryville High School, which is a powerhouse in this area. He was on campus this past weekend. Iverson Garcia from Powell High School, and it seems like Powell High School is starting to turn out those defensive linemen. Walter Nolan with the Powell High School for his senior season, and Iverson Garcia, who was on campus this past weekend, met with Rodney Gardner. Rodney Gardner loves the prospect and the makeup of Iverson Garcia. So, East Tennessee, 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot here. Last couple of years, starting to get really, really good in terms of turning out some talent, not just Division I talent, but some power conference talent as well.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. If you can get the local kids, that helps you so much. And I'm sure the Tennessee fans like going out to see those kids play. Mm-hmm. Back to the class of 26 for a second. When you look at the group overall so far, again, they're around 10 commitments. Is this kind of the normal pattern for the Vols at this point of the year? Because, again, they're backloaded, so I didn't expect them to be number one in the nation right now because they backloaded all the visits. But is this about where you expected them to be?
Yeah, I mean, numbers-wise, 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. I know they're at 10 right now, and they've gotten 2 commits here in the last week. KJ McClain, who's a defensive back from the state of New Jersey, and then Lance Thompson, who is a legacy player from the state of Tennessee. His father played here. His mother ran track here, and he committed on Saturday morning to kind of kick off. Luke Thompson, excuse me, not Lance, from Franklin County High School. So they've gotten a couple commitments here lately, but yeah, to your point, they backload the schedule, the official visit schedule. They kind of get all these done. They spend the month of July really focusing kind of on the class ahead, but July is kind of dead. Then they used to open it up. I know that's different this year, but that last couple days in July, then they would put the full court press on these guys again before they start their senior seasons. But typically Tennessee under Josh Heupel, they pick up a lot of commits in July, some in August, and then they sprinkle some in during the fall, and of course kind of go after what their needs are, if anybody leaves the class and anything like that. So not shocked. I think this is kind of on schedule for Tennessee, but I as the summer goes on, July, I expect many commits for Tennessee because typically that's the way that Josh Heupel's built his class.
Well, I expect Tennessee to get 6 to 8 commitments over the next 3 to 4 weeks because, again, they got 21 kids visiting just next weekend based on the list I'm looking at. A few won't, and they'll probably add a few too. It'll end up being somewhere around 20. A few of them, there's no way that you can't get some of them. But it's easy to sell Tennessee. Yeah. I love that stadium, by the way. It's probably my favorite in college football. What is the next step for Tennessee recruiting? the fans talk about like, okay, we need to beat Georgia more or Bama. Like, what do you think the next step is for the Vols?
Yeah, just increasing the blue chip ratio. I mean, I've liked Tennessee's classes an awful lot under Josh Heupel. Certainly, as you know, every fan base, wants top five class, this and that. The coaching staff has a different arena when it comes to scouting players and wanting to sign these players. This guy could be a 3-star, but the staff really likes this part about his game. They think they can develop that and then turn out into what will go on to be a 4-star, maybe in a 5-star later on. So I think Tennessee wants obviously to be a top 10 consistent class. Tennessee wants to jump in the top 5 so much. But overall, in order to beat Georgia's the only team that Josh Heupel's not had success with. And I mean, we can go on a tangent here on how the roster needs to improve and what Josh Heupel's next step is. But winning on the road is very much one of those. Like Alabama and Florida this year, you got to win one of those games on the road. But Georgia is the only team that Josh Heupel's not had any success in since he's been here at Tennessee. And what does Georgia do every single year, man? They just load up top 5 class after top 5 class after top 5 class. So, recruiting is huge. It's the backbone of your program. Development is even bigger. Okay, you bring talent to campus, but if you don't develop that talent, as you know, you're not going to be a very good football team. So I think Tennessee's done a great job in the developmental aspect. I think Tennessee's done a decent job in the recruiting aspect, but I think fans certainly want Tennessee to be more consistently pushing towards a top 5 class. And if you do that, you can start finding regular wins over teams like Georgia and all that. So we'll see what happens. I think Josh Heupel's done a pretty good job, especially considering, where he took over this program. I mean, the negative recruiting, the cloud hanging over. I mean, sanctions for this program, right? I mean, there were people negatively recruiting this program up until last cycle. Like, he's been kind of working through all that and still found a guy like, James Pierce, who went on to be a first-round draft pick, just, using him as one example. So I think the blue chip ratio needs to continue to get better. It's not bad, but it needs, whenever the class has been done, but it needs to continue to rise a little bit more.
The last thing I want to talk about, we'll start now and go into the final segment. I'm sure you've read and heard, Lord only knows how many different ways, stuff about the House settlement. I've even talked about it on the Portal podcast with relation to Tennessee, because I know there was a ruling before the House settlement came out in the state of Tennessee saying they're not going to adhere to it, basically. That's the short version. What is the sentiment that you get around Tennessee? And like, do you expect a lot of pushback and all that stuff? Because this is going to be lawsuit city from 100 different directions and every way on Title IX's already. There's been a Title IX lawsuit and all that. But do you think Tennessee's really going to try to buck the trend and not pay attention to any of it with this clearinghouse? What have you heard?
No, Chancellor Don DePlowman came out, or there was a report that came out a couple weeks ago, maybe in the last 2 weeks or something, that said that they will comply and they will go along with the other Power 4 schools and sign the whatever they call it, the commission arm or whatever it is. So they're going to sign it. They're going to play ball. But to your point, yeah, there's going to be lawsuits after lawsuits after lawsuits. I mean, you got a high-profile player that's about to rack up an NIL. I mean, if he's got good people around him, I mean, he's going to say, no, you don't get to know how much money I make. That's my right. That's not your right. So there's going to be tons and tons of lawsuits in that regard. So I'm intrigued to kind of see what all that happens. But it does appear that Tennessee is going to play ball with the other schools. I mean, the SEC was never going to kick Tennessee or Vanderbilt out. Maybe Vanderbilt, but the SEC was never.
That one I can see.
Yeah, the SEC was never going to kick out a founding member in Tennessee based on just what all that brings to the program. So this whole thing's going to be interesting. I mean, not just football. I know we're talking football here, but basketball scholarships going from 12 to 15. Baseball going down to 34, but Tennessee's going to fully scholarship the baseball team, which is it's a good thing, but a problem in itself because those baseball programs have like 50 guys on their team. Revenue share is coming. How much is revenue share? And that's a good topic for your show. I know you've already talked about it, but how big of a deal is that going to be in recruiting? Because name, image, and likeness is still going to be very much a thing, right? Which you can profit off your own name, image, and likeness. Couple that in with the lawsuits in terms of how much money you get on a deal, but the revenue share. If LSU is giving you this percentage, but Tennessee's only giving you this percentage, how much of a factor is that in someone's recruiting? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years to see how all of this evolves. But it appears like Tennessee's going to play ball like everybody else in the SEC.
Your last point there, talking about the rev share percentages, is something that I think is absolutely fascinating. And that's something I want to talk about next here on the Portal Podcast. The Tennessee Volunteers have all kinds of money for NIL, depending on how you want to look at it or who you believe. Obviously, the original Nico deal kind of put it in perspective. But with the new House settlement, Eric, do you think that they're going to try to lean into their collectives more to get some of the, like a Tristen Keys, to try to get, let's just use him. That's an easy one. I'm sure his NIL deal will not be small. So do you think that's something that's going to be a little bit bigger? Like they're going to try to really lean into their ability to use their NIL collectives, or is it going to be a little bit more random depending on the player?
I don't know, man. That's a really, really good question. I think it all depends on the player. I think everybody's got a different situation. Obviously, yeah, I mean, a guy like, using him as an example, Tristen Keys is not going to come cheap. Not going to come cheap for Tennessee, not going to come cheap for LSU, wherever he goes. Certainly, I think they're going to rely on the collective in order to kind of make that happen. How you go about this, what's the dollar amount that you have to report? I mean, what was that stat? Like over 65 or 70% of the deals last year, would have been turned down or blocked or whatever. And again, like that's just that's not sustainable. Like that's not going to hold up. I mean, there's just no way that is going to be the operational plan for that strong arm or whatever it is. So I don't know. It's a really good question. I don't have a good answer for you, but I think it's more or less every situation is different depending on the player. But Tennessee will continue to rely on what it's been doing the past couple of years, and a really, really good collective in the volunteer club for Spire Sports.
Well, I think there's a couple of things with this, and I'll try to explain this the best I can for people who don't know this clearinghouse. Let's say Tennessee makes an offer to Tristen, and for whatever reason, they're the last one to make him offer. It's down to LSU and Tennessee. Again, this is just hypothetical. If he knows exactly what his deal is with LSU and it's been cleared, and he wants to make a decision that day, how fast is this clearinghouse going to go through stuff? Like this sounds like lawyer kind of stuff. And in my experience, that is not quick. How does a kid the day before signing day or something, and his decision could come way down the road? It could be, how is that going to work? I can tell you right now, the first time, and it's going to happen to every school, that the clearinghouse is slow on their feet. This stuff about reporting the deals is going to go right out the window. Tennessee or anybody else. That's my biggest concern, because you're not going to lose a 5-star recruit because the other side is dragging their feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How quickly are you going to go back to, paying guys under the table?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. 100%.
Yeah. Breaking NCAA rules. I mean, again, like the whole point of name, image, and likeness has been, to profit off your own name, image, and likeness. It was never intended to be pay for play, but it's exactly that. It's been pay for play the past couple of years. But it's been legal essentially. You just can't phrase it as pay for play. How quickly are programs in the SEC or the Big Ten or, wherever going to go back to just, paying guys under the table and just kind of being hush hush about it, paying a third party or, whatever the case is. I mean, I think that's going to come back big time. Simply because, to your point, you are not going to wait on a third party to get the all clear and all go, right? I mean, a prospect is not going to have the patience for that. And while you're waiting, another team can get back in the game and up their offer or whatever. So again, it's a big time mess, and there's more questions right now than anybody has answers for. It's kind of one of those things we got to sit and watch and see how it plays out, because we haven't been through this avenue before, but it sounds like we're about to start making our way through it.
For those who don't know, July 1st, so 2 weeks from now, is when it quote unquote officially begins. But the conversation that Eric and I are having, I guarantee you, everybody around the Tennessee athletic department, everybody at Memphis or Alabama or Florida State or anywhere else, they're all looking at it the same way. Like, how are we going to negotiate through this and get timely answers? Parents aren't going to want to sit around either. They got to go back home. They got to fly. They got to get to the airport. The NIL stuff is usually handled on the official visit that day. There is no way on a weekend you're going to get that stuff through a clearinghouse.
No.
Zero chance.
So, I mean, we know how slow the NCAA moves just in general, just ruling on eligibility for a player or suspension on a player, whatever. I mean, it's going to be the same thing.
And I'm really curious to see how many people they have for this, because to my knowledge, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just football. Let's use the Vols baseball program. There are guys making some money there, especially some of those starting pitchers, I'm sure. Any deal you make with any recruit in any sport, men or women, how many people do they have in this? They need thousands. Who's going to be staffing all this? Who's paying all these people? And how qualified are they? I mean, there is a lot of, I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. So I'm curious if somebody literally sues this clearinghouse due to their ineptitude, just because they're too slow and dragging their feet.
And then how quickly can it change? You know, when are they going to change the rules back? When are they going to revert back? Or what's the
exactly?
What's the how do they adapt? I guess is what I'm trying to say. What's Plan B? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. If anybody needs a job, by the way, go work for the NCAA because they're going to need all hands on deck trying to review all these cases, right?
Yeah, I just don't see how you could do it. Just if you were just covering nothing but the Southeastern Conference in just football and basketball, you'd need a ton of people.
No.
But it's every conference in every sport. There's no way. So, yeah, I don't see how that's going to work, but I would love to be proven wrong. It's not very often I say that, but this is one of those times. So what it be if that's truly the case?
It's an attempt. Again, it's in the simplest form. It's the toothpaste out of the bottle. Okay. It's been out for a couple of years. Now, I think everybody wants guardrails. I think everybody wants structures, and I get that. I'm all for players making as much as somebody's willing to pay them. Okay, I'm not against that. But in terms of the Wild Wild West, and there's other things you can do. Like, I mean, the transfer portal windows have got to go. There needs to be one window. The spring window's got to go. I mean, that's a conversation for another day, in my opinion. The calendar has got to be much better. The month of December is horrible on football coaches. But in the simplest form, there needs to be some guardrail. There needs to be some structure. And you're coming in, 4 or 5 years after the fact, and you're trying to make that structure. Well, I mean, the toothpaste has been out of the bottle for so long, you can't cram that back in there. And it's just a big mess. It's a very big mess. And so I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned because my world could be very topsy-turvy covering recruiting every day. That'll be interesting. But Eric, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Yep, tons of recruiting stuff. Again, Tennessee had 16 official visitors on campus this past weekend. Probably going to get about 20 this weekend. A lot of recruiting talk over on Locked On Vols, on YouTube every single day, wherever you find your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, all that good stuff. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at _Caner, where I post the episodes every single day.
Appreciate it, my friend. You can find the Portal Podcast on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, and everywhere else you get your pods. We will see you again soon. Take care.